Thank you for tuning in once again to his Vine and Fig Tree podcast. My name is Kurt Olson. I'm your host, coming to you on April 1st, 2026. Um, Three things here to bring to your attention, all connected to uh, the events of this week that culminate with Easter. And they all involve Christians and leads to a question. What do actions by a Finnish Supreme Court, the Canadian House of Commons, and the Chicago Bulls all have in common? And to provide some context, let's just kind of lay some groundwork of what started with this week. Over last weekend in Syria, it included Sunday. We had Islamists go into Christian villages and kill people. Additionally, on Palm Sunday, I'm going to call it a city. I don't know how large it is. And I don't know if the folks in Nigeria pronounce it Jos or Yos, spelled Jos. But in that city or town in Nigeria, 10 Christians were slaughtered. And this is a week where, if you are in Africa, the Middle East, parts of Asia, it can be an incredibly dangerous time because there are people who don't care that you're about to celebrate the most notable time on the Christian calendar. All they care about is eliminating people who name the name of Christ. Now, when you come to Finland, Canada, and the United States, the city of Chicago, things aren't quite like that. But it is a level of persecution that is still there nonetheless. Allow me to explain. Since the last time I did a podcast a week ago, there were events with each of these: Finland, Canada, and the Chicago Bulls. And in each case, there were things that were done that come against people of faith. In the description to the podcast, I'm going to have a couple links to these accounts. The first one is out of Finland. Pavi Räsänen, a member of parliament in that Scandinavian country, and Lutheran Church Bishop Juhana Pahola. They were charged a number of years ago, both of them, as criminals under the War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity section of Finland's criminal code for writing and publishing a pamphlet for church members more than 20 years ago when Finland was considering redefining marriage. The prosecution began in 2019 when Räsänen tweeted Romans 1:24-27 to question her church's decision to sponsor the Helsinki Pride Parade. What followed was a grueling criminal investigation into her past statements, including hours upon hours of interrogation at the hands of the state. She was criminally charged for the tweet, in addition to the 2004 church pamphlet and a 2019 radio discussion. Pahola, who published the pamphlet for their church, was charged alongside her. Notably, the pamphlet was written years before the enactment of the law under which Rassanen and Pahola were prosecuted. Both the trial and appellate courts acquitted the two unanimously. The Finnish Supreme Court upheld the acquittals related to the tweet, but a 3-2 vote convicted both for publishing the pamphlet. While it is just that the acquittals have been upheld, the vigor with which the state pursued the entire case is cause for great alarm. The relentless fervor of the prosecution reveals the extent to which our Western democracies are comfortable punishing views that differ from the elite orthodoxy. That happened about a week ago. And typically when there is a law that happens and there are actions before it, those actions before it don't get touched. In this case, that didn't happen. And what you get are these vaguely worded laws where a lot of things can fit under the umbrella. And you get essentially what's going on here is views that Christians uphold about marriage, sexuality, gender identity is getting criminalized. And that also brings us to Canada. Because about a week ago there, something similar happened. The House of Commons, now, this is just one step for it to becoming law. But if it were to advance and reach the Prime Minister's desk, he has indicated he will sign it. This is known as Bill C-09, the Combating Hate Act. It declares that everyone who commits an offense referred to in the section as the included offense under this act or any act of Parliament, if the commission of the included offense is motivated by hatred based on race, national or ethnic origin, language, color, religion, sex, age, mental or physical disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity or expression, this is either an indictable offense or guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction. The legislation defines hatred as an emotion of an intense or an extreme nature that is clearly associated with vilification and detestation. Additional acts prohibited under the legislation include engaging in conduct with the intent to provoke a state of fear in a person in order to impede their access to buildings or structures that are primarily used for religious worship, or educational institutions, residences for seniors, and cemeteries used by members of protected classes. And they're essentially there in Canada as well. They're basically saying if you hold biblical values and happen to quote scripture in doing so, you would fall under this hate act. And Europe and Canada are both, they have increasingly have had growing opposition to free speech. Ideas that run against perhaps what the elites would have everyone think is acceptable. But if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, go to church, quote scripture, you run into situations where these laws or actions you're confronting very quickly. And it's bad enough that this kind of stuff is happening with countries that we would regard as allies in the West. And that brings us to what happened Monday with the Chicago Bulls. Jaden Ivey is a point guard, or shooting guard for them, who averages a little less than 10 points a game. Um, he's a contributor on the teams he's played. And I don't know how recent it's been, but he has converted to Christianity. Apparently had a very challenging upbringing, even as a professional, engaged in some things that I'm sure he would even admit today were not wise decisions at that time. But he, as a Christian, playing in the NBA, the National Basketball Association, he is went to Instagram the other day and took issue with the NBA celebrating Pride Month and specifically calling doing so unrighteous. After that happened, the Chicago Bulls summarily waived him, essentially making him a free agent for any team to pick up. But there is this chaos and confusion and mayhem now surrounding this guy because, he's a guy who isn't afraid of his Christian beliefs. And this is where we have to take a step back and look at other things that have been happening in the NBA. Okay? Both in Trump 1 and now in Trump 2. Golden State Warriors coach Steve Kerr, never afraid to pontificate, lecture, and virtue signal about anything that the Trump administration does. We have gotten the same thing from the likes of LeBron James, one of the superstars in this league, and who has a product made by Nike under slave labor in China. And they get to say all kinds of things that aren't regarded as conduct detrimental to the team or the league. Jaden Ivey can have teammates who come into the locker room and brag about their exploits the night before with any number of women, let alone just one. And does he want to hear that? And you have guys in the league who have been accused of assaulting women and other things. And barely anything is done to them, if anything at all. And we now have a guy who is vocal about his faith and his beliefs, and he gets subjected basically to Christian discrimination, religious discrimination, based on ideas that line up with the Bible. And this is going to be some very interesting times because since that happened, there have been some other players in the league that have vouched for him and basically said, if they're going to waive him, they might as well waive me too. There has also been Travion Henderson. Now, to make people aware of some things involving Travion Henderson, Travion Henderson was a high draft pick this past year. Number one, I believe number one or first or second round for the New England Patriots. And as the season wore on, he worked himself into the offensive rookie of the year conversation. And Travion Henderson attended Ohio State. And I've talked about this in the past. As we talked about things involving religious revival or spiritual revival in this country, back in September 2023 or 2024, I'm sorry, the Ohio State Buckeyes football team basically led a revival and baptism on their campus, and Travion Henderson was, very involved in that. And even as he's come to the NFL, very outspoken on issues of faith. And when the events went down with Jaden Ivey, there were a number of athletes who are Christians in other leagues that came forward and posted things on their social media accounts. And Travion Henderson was perhaps the most vocal. Travion Henderson, pardon me, Travion Henderson quoted a variety of verses, and even to a point where Mike Vrabel, his coach in New England, was asked questions yesterday about Travion Henderson, and because there were fans that were popping out of the woodwork saying, "Oh, the New England Patriots need to deal with Travion Henderson." So, I'm guessing there's a whole host of teams that need running backs in the NFL that would gladly take Travion Henderson, because when he shoots out of a cannon past an offensive line, it becomes very difficult to catch him. But far more importantly, you have this stuff that's now happening in professional sports, and I will find the piece by Jason Whitlock, but he on his podcast, he for Outkick, he did a interview with a handful of guys that are connected to sports media and faith issues, and there's talk in the locker room that Jaden Ivey was becoming preachy, and and based on things that typically happen in locker rooms, you know, certain other behavior doesn't get brought under control. So why did the Bulls feel the need to do this? Well, and the harsh reality is, if it was a Muslim in the league that said some things about Christianity, it would have been regarded as they're entitled to their opinion. And I have said this before, and I will say it again. Americans don't want politics in their professional and college athletics. Yet the NCAA, the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, Major League Baseball have all done this in recent years. And they will pick these nights. And even in the NHL, they've had controversies with people declining to wear a pride jersey because of their personal beliefs. And I don't think the players want it. The fans don't want it. Yet the leagues and the teams insist they have to do this. And I mean, it's one thing when it's America against some notable enemy, whether it's Russia back in the during the Cold War or even presently, China, or any number of other things. Um, it's a very different thing when you have virtue signaling about issues in the culture that people can land on all kinds of sides on, and that would include the players that these teams have under contract, and you just automatically expect everybody to just drink the Kool-Aid and get in line in the echo chamber and line up and just say whatever, when there are players that would say, "Sorry, don't agree." And so in this build up to Easter, in this build up to um the most important day on the Christian calendar, other than potentially the ascension of Christ into heaven, um, leading up to the death, burial, and resurrection of the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and but that's where we are at this time, and it's becoming really critical to see these things that are happening in the West, places where been acceptable to hold views that line up with the Bible, but suddenly it's not. And so those are the three things I have for you out of Finland, Canada, here in the U.S. with the Chicago Bulls and the NBA. I have a column I am writing for Easter Sunday on the issue of sin, and that's all I'm going to say about it. And this podcast is on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and if you like what you're hearing, folks, please share it. Um, and if you like what you're reading in my columns, newsletters, please share those as well. And until next time, God bless and goodbye.